Thank you. Thank you for that wonderful introduction. It's a great pleasure to be back in Assam, in Dibrugarh. I was at the festival last year, the first Dibrugarh University International Literature Festival, and it was such a joy, and it's so wonderful to see it going from strength to strength this year, to see so many of you here. In the UK, we have a game that we call Fantasy Dinner Party. I don't know if you have the same thing in India, but it's where we say, if you could invite anyone you wanted to come for dinner, who would you choose? And people will say maybe Shakespeare, or some famous explorer, or their favourite actor, or whatever. Well, if we were playing Fantasy Literary Festival, then I have to say this panel would probably be pretty much my dream panel. I'm sitting on stage with three writers whose work means a great deal to me for very different reasons, and I'm so excited about this discussion today. We've had brilliant introductions already, so I won't spend a huge time going into why all these three people are so eminent and so important and why their work is so valuable, but I wanted to share my connection to them. So TÉTÉ KPOMASSIE, as you've heard, the author of An African in Greenland. An African in Greenland was my Togolese choice for my year of reading the world back in 2012, when I set myself the challenge of trying to read a book from every country in the world. And I was astonished when I found TÉTÉ Michel's work. I was first alerted to it by a Wikipedia entry, the most astonishing Wikipedia entry I have ever read, which detailed the outline of your life and your experience running away to Greenland. And I knew I had to read this memoir. I was unprepared, though, for how incredibly life-affirming, joyful, curious, and just... It blew my mind open, your book, TÉTÉ Michel, translated into English by James Kirkup. And when I wrote about TÉTÉ Michel's book back in 2012 on my blog, I said that he was the writer I would most like to meet in the world. And then a few years later, well, some years later, we met, and now we're on the stage together. And in fact, as we heard in the introduction, TÉTÉ Michel is returning to Greenland again later this year, and I will be going with him to write about the trip for the Sunday Times newspaper. So it's very exciting, and I'm so thrilled to have you here. You truly are a real, you have set a literary benchmark in so many ways. Sitting next to TÉTÉ Michel, CHODEN. And CHODEN was also, her work was also a choice of mine for my year of reading the world. And her novel, The Circle of Karma, is a book that stays with me. It's an incredibly powerful story of a young woman, Somo, who sets out to pursue a religious life at a time when women didn't really have that option. She herself is a trailblazer. In the 1950s in Bhutan, and she goes to northern India, goes around the Gompas in northern India, and goes on a real journey, both physically and spiritually. And CHODEN was the first Bhutanese woman to write a novel in English, which is The Circle of Karma. An incredible achievement. And I'm honoured to be focusing on The Circle of Karma for one chapter in my new book, Relearning to Read, and I'm also devoting another chapter to TÉTÉ Michel's book. So it's such a joy to have them both on the stage. And then ABDULAI SILA, whose work I came to know after reading the world, because your novel, The Ultimate Tragedy, which was translated into English by Jethro Suter, was the first Bissau-Guinean novel to come into English. When I read The World back in 2012, there was no commercially available literature in English that I could get hold of from Guinea-Bissau. Are you okay? Do you need a hand? Oh, sure. And so I was delighted when Jethro Suter, the translator, having heard through my project that this gap existed, went and identified your work to bring through. But you were also a trailblazer before that, because you were the first person to publish a novel in Guinea-Bissau. Now, excuse me, I'm choking. So we've heard a little bit about the backstory to each of your projects. Thank you, KUNZANG. Thank you. That's a good idea. Thank you. But I wanted to ask you to think about what it was that made you have the, whatever it took, whatever that special something is, to be the first person to do these extraordinary things. So we heard some of the things that contributed. We heard about the snake, TÉTÉ Michel, and how that gave you a fright, and you heard about Greenland. But I can imagine many people might have a nasty experience with a snake and might read about Greenland, and they wouldn't then make this extraordinary journey. What made the difference for you? What made you be that person, to be this first person to make this extraordinary journey? The microphone's there.
The difference was that I was...
Sorry, TÉTÉ Michel, we just need to turn the microphone on.
The difference is that I was an African boy, because I think if a European boy met the same accident as I had with the snake, he would not have reacted in the same way. My culture obliged me to become friends with the snakes. And there was a ceremony in which I had to hold the snake, which was put around my neck, and the priestess was asking me not to be nervous, but to relax, to let the snake just caress you, etc. I closed my eyes, my feet, and I was trembling. Okay, and when the ceremony was over, she asked my father to bring me back to the forest, so that I become a snake priest myself. Oh, nobody asked me anything, because I was an African boy. And my father said, yes, I will bring him back. So, what would I do? What would I say? Then, I went to school for 6 years only. My school teacher taught me to write and to read. I didn't go to college, I didn't go to any university. This is one of the first universities I visited in my life. Then I went to the missionaries bookshop. I saw a book flat on the counter, and the title was Les Esquimaux du Groenland à l'Alaska. The Eskimos meant nothing to me. Groenland, no. Alaska, I didn't know where it was. But the cover of the book showed a man dressed in animal skins with a harpoon. I didn't know the word harpoon, but that arm. And he was smiling, and it seemed to me that he was smiling to me. I bought the book. I went to the beach, and I was fascinated when I read that book, because I learned that it is so cold in Greenland that there are no snakes. No. Where is that paradise? No trees. Oh, no. How do the people live there? And I learned that in that country, the children are kings. They are respected. While in my country, I was not respected at all. My father said, oh yes, I will bring, just like a packet, I will bring him back. Oh, so for me the Eskimos became, in my imaginary way, my people. So, but that was the idea to go to Greenland. But where is Greenland? I went back to the bookshop. They showed me a map with Greenland situated at the north of America. I said, oh, how could I get there? And, I ran away. To make short, I ran away. I started doing different jobs along my way. I started by Ghana, Ivory Coast, Senegal, Mauritania, etc., up to Dakar, doing different kinds of jobs I could get. But into blanket, when I was in Dakar, I went to Mauritania, but I could not go to France, because, no, I could not go to Algeria, because they told me that I must go back to Niger to cross the desert. Okay, I came back to Dakar and I had no job. The Indian embassy employed me as a typist. I worked there for 3 months, and that allowed me to earn the money to travel to France.
Oh, so it's all India's fault then?
Yeah.
India got you to Greenland.
Yeah, they contributed. Then I crossed France, Belgium, Germany. I arrived in Denmark. There I got a job as in a restaurant as a dishwasher for 3 months. And the money I earned allowed me to buy my ticket on board a boat going to Greenland. So that is the difference between me and another.
Yeah, it's a combination of factors: personal, cultural, and timing, and education. All these things coming together, and the snake that popped out and surprised you in the first place, and the fact that pythons were sacred in your community, and so this ritual was performed. All these factors, incredible weaving together. KUNZANG,
yes.
What was it for you that made you make this extraordinary step of being the first woman to write a novel in English as well? Why English?
Hello. My story is not as exciting or as focused as TÉTÉ Michel's. Mine just flowed along. I come from a country called Bhutan. I think many of the people here, Assamese is just across the border. So we are very close. But Bhutan until the late 1950s was closed. Nobody knew about the country. And it was an oral society, so we weren't writing, and in fact there was hardly any literate people. The only literate people were the monks and some of the government officials, because there were no schools. The only schools were the monastic schools, which were attended, where the boys would go. So in the early 60s, when Bhutan decided to open up and send the children to school and give children access to modern education, and they called it modern Western education. But the problem was, when they made this policy to implement it, there were no schools. There were only monastic schools. So the alternative was for children to be selected, or actually we were selected and kind of volunteered, and kind of, children, all the decisions are made by the adults. So it was decided. I didn't decide, but my parents and the bureaucrats decided to send me to school in Darjeeling. So we made this trek, and in 1962 when I came, there were not a single kilometer of roads we had to walk. And my walk from my home, which is central Bhutan, to Galipur, which is the end of the central part of Bhutan, touching India, it took us 12 days, camping and walking with a caravan. And this made a big impression on me to see how it was for a woman. I was a woman, the only one from my village who was in this journey. How important over the years I watched how lives began to change with the roads being constructed. So every year I would go back and forth along this road. Every year the journey to my home would get less and less. And that was when Bhutan was changing, what modern development was happening. And then what I realized was the roads were using machines, but a lot of human people who had no names, no faces, and they were just working there, making it possible for people like us to travel, have opportunities, to get connected. So, and then more than that, I saw the women working on the roads with their children. And here I was using the roads that they made for me to go into, give me another opportunity. And I began to think about the women who would never have a chance to travel these roads. Although they made these roads, they would still have to work. So the story, actually the seed of that story, Circle of Karma, grew from there, and it became a story about a woman who makes a physical journey on the roads that she made, that she contributed to, and a search for her spiritual journey too.
Fantastic, thank you. And Abdulai, can you tell us what brought you to be the first person to publish a novel in Guinea-Bissau, and how did that check?
Yeah, thank you, and please allow me to first express my gratitude to the organizers for inviting me and coming for the first time to India and to talk to such young people here. This is very important. We as Africans to encourage this opportunity to talk, tell our stories to people from other parts of the world. Well, as for your question, maybe I should tell first a little bit about my background. I come from a country that was colonized by a country that was itself underdeveloped, which is Portugal. In 1963, we started a liberation war that ended up, we had gone to become independent. And that happened in 1974. And during that war, almost every family paid a bill. I lost members of my family when my village was hit. And one of my brothers became paraplegic, so I could not walk. It happened that he was my best friend. I was used to talk with him, and being independent was such a thing that people can't imagine. The repression was so strong that everyone, almost everyone, got involved in freeing the country. That friend of mine died with the age of 40 after spending 7 years, half of his life, sitting on a wheelchair. It was a tough time. And when he died, I had no more someone to talk with. I started writing a diary, to keep talking to him. At a certain point, I was no more talking about what was happening. I started writing about what I would like to see happen. Fiction. So I developed some skills because, and this is very important, we had to write in a language that is not ours. Okay? And at the time of independence, 90% of the population was illiterate. Yes, we had to write. 90% of the population. I had members of my family that had not the opportunity to go to school. Girls, mostly. So some of my sisters are also illiterate, or they were. I had a dream, which is technology. So I got a chance to go to a college in Germany and get a degree in electrical engineering. However, I kept the desire to keep writing and, as I said before, writing fiction. I asked myself, what should I write? Because there was no tradition of writing in my country at all. All the books we had a chance to read were from abroad. And under the colonial regime, it was forbidden access to novels, other than one that the censorship allowed to circulate. However, I had the opportunity to access some books from Brazil. And that helped me a lot. So I decided when I was, it happened at 82, I was 24 years old, to write my first novel. Since I had not much experience, I decided to write about our experience dealing with colonialism, the relationship between the colonizer and the colonized. And it was done in a context where our hope was to see colonialization as our last tragedy. So I gave it that title, The Last Tragedy. Unfortunately, it was not. So this is more or less the background.
Thank you. I'm really struck hearing the three of you speak by the fact that hadn't really dawned on me before, but that you all come from places where there isn't much of a written literary tradition in terms of the storytelling. I mean, TÉTÉ, Michel, you were a trailblazer physically in terms of the journey you took, but the writing of your book was itself a trailblazing thing, because there were no books by people from Africa travel writing in that way. Travel writing was a European thing. It was white people going out and describing how they found parts of the world. But you created a new version, your own version, and one of the things I love about your writing is that you discover yourself as much as you discover Greenland, and that I think is one of the real strengths of your book. I was wondering, how conscious were you at the time of being the first? You, obviously when you arrived in Greenland, the reaction you had from the Inuit told you that there weren't many people like you they'd seen before. But how conscious were you of being the first, and how did that shape what you did? Did it affect you at all? We have to turn them off when the other one's on.
You know, it is difficult to be the first. In my case, it seems to me that I have not stopped dreaming. I am still in that dream of my childhood. Before I met the people there in Greenland, I met so many changes in my life. I left Copenhagen on board a ship which took 8 days to arrive in Greenland. I was completely lost because up to 10 o'clock in the evening, the sun was still there in the sky, and at 11 o'clock I used to go to my cabin and read my book with the sunlight. At midnight, there was no night. Oh, how can my father or my grandfather believe this? So everything for me was before meeting the Greenlanders. And then suddenly, one morning, I think the 6th days, it seemed to me that some swans were swimming. Oh no, those were the first ice floating on the water. Oh, in my country, you have to open your fridge to see a piece of ice. But then there were plenty of ice on the sea. Okay, we continue, and those small ice, which I thought were swans swimming, they were becoming bigger and bigger and bigger, and some were just like ant-hills, or some were just like camels, moving gently from one side to the other. By the evening, the pack ice was so thick that the boat could not cross. So the boat had to move forward, come backward, and then hit the ice again, and then centimeter by centimeter, we were moving like that. And suddenly I realized that my clothes I bought in Europe were not warm enough. The whole world became so cold. I said, oh my God, I have never seen this cold in my life before. I put on all the socks I had in my luggage, and the ground was really cold because we were there among the ice. And the following day, oh, there were mountains of ice, icebergs. Oh. I was used to look at the palm trees, and there were mountains of ice. And on the 8th day, we arrived in a town called Kakotok. Kakotok in Eskimo means the white. So the the whole country, I mean, the sea, the land, the snow, etc. Okay, yeah, it's Greenland, the snakeless Greenland. So what to do? Then I took my time to come out of the boat. And from my porthole, I could see the inhabitants chatting. They were in the harbor talking. Then slowly, I came out. As soon as they saw me, oh, they stopped talking. They stopped speaking. And I had my hands in my pocket. They were looking at me, and the children started weeping, crying. And I heard tornasuk. I learned later that tornasuk means the devil. And they were so frightened, ashamed. But the parents were also looking at me, but they were not afraid. So they parted and they let me pass. And suddenly, a woman said a word. I didn't understand. She said, "Kusanak, handsome." I didn't understand. Then I just, I went. And I asked if anyone will put me up. And they said, "Oh yes, everybody wants to put you up." And by the evening, the radio, Nook, the radio in the capital, announced the arrival of an African in Greenland. And the children were asking me, "Kanok Aterapik?" What? And then I understood that they wanted to know what is my name. I said, "Oh, TÉTÉ Michel." But that was too long for them. Then finally they called me Michel. Michel is the short form for Michel. Michel. And then afterwards they used to call me Michel Swag. Michel Swag means Michel the giant. Yeah, because the giant. So that was my first arrival. And the person who welcomed me says, "Are you hungry?" "Oh yes, I'm hungry." "Do you know what matak is?" "Matak? No, I don't know." And then she brought me the meat. It was the skin of the white whale called matak, eaten raw. I tasted. She said, "Do you like it?" I said, "Oh yes." Then she gave me a full plate of matak. Slowly, I ate the matak. But after that, I went to the ship. I asked the captain if I can have my lunch on board every day. He says, "Oh yes, we are here for 3 more days. You can have your meals here." Then I used to eat in that house, that Greenlander's house, and in the evening on board the ship, just to vary. And then when the ship left, well, there I was, the African among the Greenlanders. So that was the beginning of my story.
Thank you. Yes, KUNZANG, how conscious were you of being the first woman? You set up a publishing house, so you obviously knew about the mechanics of just creating books, but how conscious were you of being the first woman to do what you were doing, and how did that shape, or did it affect what you did?
Actually, I was in the process of writing. I didn't know actually where I was going. I just felt my experiences and my observances over my changing country and what it had done to me, how important it was for me to think of them and to document them. So I wasn't thinking of really publishing. I was just writing because I felt that these things had to be written about. And I mean, going to a publisher and trying to get my manuscript printed was really quite far from my mind. And when I showed my manuscript to some of my friends and people who read, they said, "No, this will not make a fiction or an autobiography. It can be an ethnographic book because there's so much description on the society and things like that." So it was just being pushed back and forth. And finally, about more than 20 years ago, I attended a literary festival, the SARC Literary Festival in Delhi. And that was the time when somebody said, you could actually print it. So I wasn't pushing, but I happened to be there. And what was really, I think, in my favor was the fact that I was a woman writer, and also there were no books written on Bhutan by a Bhutanese. There were a couple of books written by Europeans and outsiders, already from the 1800s when the British and, in fact, I was telling the first people who wrote about Bhutan and reached the West was the Portuguese priest in the 1600s. But after that, it was just strips and dabs, consultancy kind of documents, impressionistic accounts by the visitors who just came. So I just happened to be. I didn't work to be the first. It was never my dream to be the first. I just thought maybe there are people who are interested. When I read a chapter from that, my manuscript, people saying maybe this will make a good book, and that's when the idea came. And I was fortunate that I found the right place, and then once it was out in public, I was really frightened, I said, now what happens? Because I was in such a small society and everybody knows everybody. And how would my people I know back home, how will they react? And that was my biggest fear, instead of being, I'm the first being published. And true enough, people would say, did you write about me? Did you write? Am I included? So that's how small we are. And it was so, it was the first that we began to write about ourselves, because all the books that are there were scriptural books, and they were about miracles and about divinities and about teachings and philosophy, and writing about how you cook your food and how you travel was not there. So people really didn't know how to take it. So now it just happened that I just happened. I didn't strive for it. It just happened that
Yeah, something that comes through strong, I think, from all three of you is that you are driven by a desire to tell your story or to experience your story, which had nothing to do with wanting attention or wanting success. It was about needing to do this. Abdulai, you talked about the background to writing, but I wondered about the next stage, which was you being translated into English, which is still significant because English is the world's most published language, and so if your work is available in English, you have the biggest reach in terms of potential readers, because although Chinese and Spanish have more first language speakers, when you factor in second language speakers, English is the most spoken language and it's the most published language. So it has a huge role, an imbalanced role to play in who is heard, what is shared, which stories move around the world. What was your experience like of being the first from your nation to be translated into English? How did that happen and how did you feel about it? And has the response to the novel been different to how you found it in your home country in Guinea-Bissau? Lots of questions. Choose what you'd like to respond.
Okay, now? Yeah, and it was a mixed feeling. First of all, I was not happy. In fact, of being out of the first novel being published. And that happened. I mean, the first novel, not the translation in English. It happened about 10 or 11 years after having the book ready for publication. It didn't happen. Why? Because in my country at that time, there was a one-party rule. And there was a writers' association, which is a kind of department, of the party. And when I approached the boss there, he asked me to become a member of the youth organization. I said no. And that was a mistake. So I saw all doors closed. I couldn't publish anything. It is why the book was only published in 1994. And it happened to me, in fact, the first novel. Because all others, writers, they are published only poetry, no novels. So as to being translated into English, that feeling continued, and it was not something that I should be proud of. Believe me, I wanted to have more people, publishing before me, because I don't like the spotlights. And secondly, my focus was in my work as an engineer. I had so many challenges, so many exciting challenges, that I didn't want anything to distract me. Then it was published in French. And after 20 years, there was that opportunity, and I have to thank the translator, who is mentioned in the Dibrugarh Center. He played a great role. Yeah. This is how it happened. I did not play any significant role in that. I kept writing and running a publishing house, which was workload be enough for me, besides doing something to feed my family, my children, and so. So literature was not part of my priorities. You see? Yeah.
So fascinating, thank you. I have so much more I would like to ask, but I also want to make sure that you have a chance to ask questions. So if anyone has a question, please raise your hand and we will pass a microphone round. Any questions? If not, I've got a whole heap more, so there's no worries. Oh, there's someone here. Do we have a microphone, or are you able to call out your question? I don't think there's... Please just are you going to take a microphone? Take one.
Good afternoon, Honourable Present here, respected distinguished guests and all my dear friends. So my question is to all the distinguished guests present on the dais, that how do you feel your works have led to the cultural assimilation all over the globe?
How do you feel your work has led to
Well, this is a very interesting question, and it touches, the very base of our work, of my work at least. Globalization, for me, is just part of the ongoing battle of gaining or ending with colonization. The most known form of colonization ended, formally ended, but there are other forms. The mental colonization that we have to face, we Africans everywhere. And there was a saying that goes like this: until the lion learns how to tell his story, all credits of hunting go to the hunter. So we were in a position where we had to consume a lot of information produced by the so-called Western world, where the narrative is always the same. When they talk about Africa, is, famine, war, and things like that. You know that. So we had to face this situation by telling our own story to shape our history and to help free our minds. I don't know if you are aware of the situation of, I think there is an author that wrote a book, the Kenyan author called Ngugi wa Thiong'o, Decolonizing Minds. It's very important because we do a lot of harm to ourselves, acting the way we act, assuming the values we are seeing. Just an example. I do not want to be too long, okay? But I need to tell this. Because globalization sounds great. There should be room for everyone. It is false. This is not reality. Because of the theory of globalization, we ended up in a situation where we make choices. We adopt parameters of beauty, of the way of behavior that is not in our family. It harms us, ended up harming ourselves. Do you know how much money is spent in Africa for fake hair? By the way, most of it bought in India. Can you have an idea?
Any guesses how much money is spent in Africa on fake hair?
Let me tell you this, and you can confirm it. Google it. And there is also a documentary by Chris Rock. We, as a country, we spend more than $6 billion US yearly just in that business. Why? Because some people think we should refuse being who we are. And because of this kind of globalization, we can see people like Michael Jackson, what he did with himself. He changed his skin color. He did so many things. But back on our situation, we spent in 2030, about $6 billion. Do you know how much we spent in promoting books, publishing books, and everything around the book? Almost.
Less than 6 million.
Less than 100. Hundreds.
Hundreds. Wow.
Less than 100 would be 6 billion.
Wow. Less than 100 is 6 million. Wow.
So this is one aspect, the side effect of the so-called globalization, which can be, seen as part of the process of neocolonialization. Okay.
KUNZANG, how do you feel your work has played a part in cultural assimilation and globalization?
I spent my entire schooling in a Christian missionary school, and the curriculum was in English, and the English that was taught to us was all the books that were written by the British and the foreign authors that was just handed over to us at that time from the British school system. So we really missed the appreciation for our own region and the writers from our own region and the literature that came from the region. So before I can talk about the globalization, I would like to say how grateful I was that with my book I came to appreciate the literature in the region, especially in this region. We hardly knew anything that was happening here, and through my book and through meeting authors and having dialogues, I got to know, I'm sure many of you will know, Indira Goswami became a big important figure for me. She was from Guwahati. There's Mitra Puhan, who I got to know because of what I did. And of course Mamang Dai and Estherine and so many people from the region. So the regional, rather than going into the global and talking about the French translation of the Chinese, I was really happy to connect to my neighbors. And rather than the global assimilation, I felt really gratified and blessed to look before your nose, before your arm reaches beyond to the global world. So this is what I really value.
TÉTÉ, Michel.
Yeah, personally, I think I have no answer to this question because I don't have a special profession. I am just a traveler and observer, and watching the Inuit society, where they come from and where they are going, and the outside influence, etc. So I just keep my eyes wide open and to see how they live, how I went to the shops there, I saw banana. I said, oh my God, even the bananas came here before me. So, but they have a lot of alcohol, oh, whiskey, gin, from vodka from everywhere. So, and with the result that the young people commit suicide, and you have a great rate of the suicide rate in Greenland is high, during my first stay of 18 months with the people, I traveled from the south to the north of Greenland. I spent the Christmas in a village of 160 people and 600 hospices. And in that village, at Christmas time, the whole village was drunk. I have never seen that in my Togo before. Greenland is a treeless country, but in Christmas, the whole country was full of Christmas trees from Europe. And after Christmas, the trees are not sent back to Europe, but they are thrown in the fjords. They spoil the landscape just because of faith. All those things are disgusting, but I think they have the Greenlanders enjoy that, because they say our life is so dull that if we can go to the church and sing and light candles under the Christmas trees, yes, it brings some joy. And in Europe, people who talk about cleanness of the world, they have their home, their private home. They have their secondary home. They have their car. Some have 2 cars. They have their boat. Some have their private jet. They keep on crashing gas in the world, and they give us a lesson not to waste the world. In Greenland, the people in their family, they used to go on to move in with kayaks and the dog's head, etc. But now you have a cat, 4 wheels, Cherokee cars everywhere in the country. And when the people go to a shop to buy their food, they get out of their cars, they don't switch off the engine, because they are afraid, because by minus 40 degrees, the car may not, the engine may not start again. So they just go out, and the engine is still running, and you see the window wiper moving, and nobody is in the car. And so, a lot of contradictions. Today, the young people, the young Greenlanders, they eat pizza. Yeah, pizza, frozen pizza from Italy, from Denmark, etc. And they don't listen to the old man's stories. They are all on Facebook. And it's when I first went there in 1965, we only could listen to the radio. But today, they have every young Greenlander has his mobile phone and etc. So everything is completely changing. One night, I was coming back home alone, and the night was calm, and suddenly I raised my eyes and I saw I was frightened by a kind of cloth floating in the sky, moving sometimes with slow movements like sea waves, and suddenly it will raise up and come down just like a kite, but just move with thick air, and at the same time changing colors from red to yellow to green, etc. I said, oh, what can this be? Then I rushed home and I told I said, oh, come and see, there's something in the sky. They didn't bother to go out. They said, oh, that is north light, the northern light. I said, oh, really? The aurora borealis? They said, yes. So I went out and I watched it for a long time because all what I read in books were not, didn't frighten me. But the Greenlanders, in their language, they call that phenomena arsanerit. Arsanerit means playing ball, not football, playing ball. Because in the old days, the Eskimos used to play ball made with the seals, vessie, blubber. Yeah. They throw to each other. And they say that those lights are the spirits in the sky playing the balls. But they have no seals in the sky, so they use the skull of the dead people to throw to each other, and they play like that. So the Greenlandic children are afraid of that story. Even the dogs, especially the puppies, who see that northern light for the first time, they bark. In that village of 600 dogs, when they start barking, it's a chorus. And so when in French I write aurore boréale, it doesn't have the same meaning as arsanerit in Eskimos because of their culture, because of their legend, etc. They carry something which we don't have. When they say igloo and we say igloo, we don't mean the same thing. And sorry, but I would like to have a question for my two.
We have to stop soon.
We have to stop.
You can talk after.
Okay, we will talk there. Thank you.
Thank you. I hate to end this session. We could talk for so much longer, but I have to thank you all. You have all brought something new to the world. All of you. You were talking there, TÉTÉ, Michel, about something new, something that's precious. Well, you all three do that in your work, and I'm so grateful that you do. And I'm so grateful that you all came to join this discussion today and were so generous with your ideas and your insights. Thank you so much. Please join me in thanking our amazing panel.